Hi, this is Chet Gladkowski, and welcome to the 10th in our series on the Handyman for Life. We really need a handyman, someone who has the right touch, the right techniques, the right tools, and at just the right time can help us in our lives. And God wants to be the handyman of your life and my life. And the idea of a handyman is someone who works with things that are hard, like brick and stone and wood, because when it comes to you and to me, we have hard heads, we have hard hearts, and only He can soften them or break off the corners or make us new people. Today we're going to be looking at what it really means to forgive. Last week we looked at how to ask forgiveness, but then the last comment was that we need to forgive other people. And you might be saying, well, how do I do that? What does that look like? And the idea of forgiving someone is a positive attitude towards the offense rather than a negative attitude towards the offender. This is a really different way to have a positive attitude towards the offense. We are to not look down at that and say, you know what, God can use that. And we're not to have negative opinions or look down on the offender. Because the person who shows us this more than anyone else in all of history is Jesus. Here he is. He's been betrayed. He's been found guilty when he was really innocent. He then is thrown into jail where he is beaten. He's pummeled. He's nailed to a cross. He's lifted up. And what does he say? He doesn't look around and say, oh, I'm hurting. Oh, look at my betrayers. Oh, look at me. He says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Of all the people throughout all of history who have had so many things done to them, Jesus says, Father, forgive them. And that is the model that you and I are to have towards forgiveness. Now, I'm asking you to take a look and have a much bigger picture, a bigger frame of reference than you've ever had towards forgiveness. You might say that forgiveness is, well, I'll just shove it in the back of my brain and maybe I won't remember it. Or maybe I'll self-medicate myself with alcohol, drugs, pornography, with pride, or all sorts of other things and put on a mask, and we'll just try to handle it that way. But Jesus says that we are to forgive. We are to forgive. And he explains this in Matthew 18 when he's talking about forgiveness. He says, you wicked slave, I forgave you all the debt because why? You pleaded with me. Should you not have mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you? And in anger, the Lord handed him over to be tortured until he would pay the entire debt. So my heavenly Father will also do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother or sister from your heart. Forgiving, removing the debt. Yeah, they have a debt, but we have to act and live and think as if there is no debt. With the weight of it, because there are consequences to it. I have a friend who lives in another part of the country who just was overwhelmed when their partner of over 30 years had an extramarital affair. The consequences. But how are they to forgive? The forgiveness is to be just like Jesus forgave them. And there are physical consequences, ulcers, depression, immune system, lack of adrenaline, loss of sleep. If we don't forgive these people, they will eat our lunch physically. We will not be able to cope. And also there are spiritual implications. Our spiritual lives will be deeply impacted if we don't forgive them. And we have to forgive them like Jesus forgave us. It's an inability to love God. 1 John 4:20 and 21. Those who say, I love God, and hate their brothers or sisters are what? They are liars. For those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. The commandment we have from him is this. Those who love God, what? Must love their brothers and sisters also. You notice there's a lot of must, and will, and have to. It's not an optional thing. You say you love God, well, then you better get busy. I better get busy with the whole idea of forgiving people. You can also have doubts about our salvation. Jesus says in Matthew 6:15, "But if you do not forgive others, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." He's saying it has nothing to do with our eternal destiny, but it says if I have really received Christ and I have really understood what he did, who he is, and what he paid for me, then I will just flow with thankfulness, flow with worship, and to praise him. But it won't stop there. Because if God has forgiven me in Jesus as much as I know, then what somebody else has done must also be forgiven. There are also mental implications of not forgiving people. In Proverbs, King Solomon says, "A glad heart makes a cheerful countenance, but a sorrow of heart, the spirit is broken. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble with it. Better is a dinner of vegetables where love is than a fattened ox and hatred with it." There are all of these kinds of implications. We think we can bottle it up. My brother and I, along with our parents, when we were young, went to visit one of my aunts and uncles and cousins, and we were having a great time. And of course, the cousins went off to do stuff, and my brother took a bottle of Coke, and he used to like to drink it when it was flat. So he put his thumb, opened the bottle, put his thumb on it, and just shook the living daylights out of it. And he shook it, and he shook it, and he shook it. But the pressure inside built up so much that he couldn't stop it. And Coca-Cola spewed all over the ceiling. Needless to say, there was a conversation about that. But then a little bit later, I did the exact same thing with grape soda. So I have nothing to compare or to contrast myself with him. Grape soda on your ceiling, can you imagine? And that's exactly the same thing that happens when you and I try to bottle it up and say, I'm going to hold it in, I'm going to hide it, I'm going to self-medicate it. It will come out. Jesus says, you shall love your neighbor. How? As yourself. There's no commandment greater than this. Mark 12:31. These are our marching orders. Jesus says, you are to love people like you want to be loved. How do you want to be treated? I don't know about you, but I screw up. I make mistakes. I say things that are just really awful. And then I have to go back and ask forgiveness. How do I want to be forgiven? I want them to forgive me freely and fully so that we can move on and actually grow from it. Is that the kind of forgiveness that I am extending to other people? Is that the kind of grace that God gave to me and I want to receive it, but I must pass that kind of grace on to other people? You see, our focus must be to agree or confess with the forgiveness we've all received. In Jesus Christ, it says, I am freely forgiven. I am fully justified. I become his son, his daughter. If that's true, I must repeat or confess that out in my life and my words. Paul says in Ephesians 4:31 and 32, put away from you what? All bitterness and wrath and anger and wrangling and slander, together with all malice, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. There's no period there. As God in Christ has what? Forgiven you. You've been forgiven. You are to mimic that. You are to speak that in words. You are to speak that in actions. You are to speak that in attitudes. And we are to then concentrate on the idea that this forgiveness from God, we need to continually revisit it over and over and over again. We can't let it get old. We can't let it get stale. In Hebrews 12, it says, "Let us lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who, for the sake of the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God." Jesus exemplifies this kind of forgiveness. He was willing to offer it freely. That means you and I need to do the exact same thing. When somebody comes up to us and says, in a good attitude, "Will you forgive me?" I can't fold my arms and say, "Well, you got to prove it. You got to show me." How did Jesus forgive me? How does God look upon me with forgiveness? It is in that very same way I need to offer and give gracious forgiveness. And we need to conform our lives to that. We need to conform. 2 Corinthians 3:18 says, "And all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord, as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into that same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord of the Spirit." We are to conform our lives to His model. He has given us His Spirit. This isn't something we exercise and do on our own power. He forgave us. He indwells us. He gives us the grace, the power, and the desire to do it. So what are we to do? We must have that focus. We can't have the wrong focus of contempt, of refusing to forgive. We cannot just continually recall and revisit it over and over. We cannot clone this and say, I've got to, if I focus on it, I'll become just like them. How many drug addicts, how many alcoholics, how many people with bitterness, their children have the exact same problem? Yeah, there are genetic indicators or things like that. But if we do not forgive, we become like the people we focus on, and we become a clone of them. Paul in 2 Corinthians 10:12 says, "But when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they do not show good sense." It's a slippery slope. I look at their lives and say, they hurt me, and I'm going to focus on that, and I'm not going to forgive them. That will dwell and grow into a root of bitterness that will go deep into my soul and come out in my words and my thoughts and my actions and my attitudes. And I wind up becoming just like them. And so do you. Paul goes on more in 2 Corinthians 10:17 and 18. It says, "Let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. For it is not those who commend themselves that are approved, but those whom the Lord commends." We are to be the kind of people that says, I am comparing myself not to you, I am comparing myself to Jesus. How did He forgive me? What was He willing to do? He was willing to leave the throne of heaven and come down here to this stinking earth in order to live a life I couldn't live, to die a death I couldn't die, in order to make me clean and holy and pure before God the Father. If He was willing to do that, then my forgiving someone else is just a small thing in comparison. You see, we become like the one we love. Who am I focusing on? Who is the one I love? If I love Jesus, if I become like Him, then I'll be able to offer forgiveness freely and fully, because that's exactly how I received it. I received forgiveness freely. It was received fully by me. I cannot hoard forgiveness. I was forgiven of all the things. You were forgiven all things. And now the shoe is on the other foot. The shoe is on your foot and my foot to walk like Jesus walked and to offer forgiveness to those to whom we have brokenness. It's time right now to forgive them and begin that process. Would you pray with me? Our Father and our God, I thank you that your love for us is great and you see us in Jesus fully as your son, fully as your daughter. Thank you that you have forgiven us. May we forgive others just like you forgave us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks so much. God bless and bye-bye.